together, and we know that this was in conflict. Well, we found out at the last minute this was in conflict with a ad hoc subcommittee meeting, a Claremont Community Planning Group subcommittee meeting. It's the subcommittee that's been formed to update the Claremont Community Plan. I don't know how many of you are familiar with what the city's done at this point, but they decided to update the entire community plan. And that plan printed out is yay big. So an update of a community plan takes years to do. And that's one of the reasons that they wanted to move land use and zoning out of the hands of the subcommittee that was formed to conclude it into the bigger document, because it's going to take time. And they're trying to buy time. So I'm going to start out with some of the original promises that were made to the community. And forgive me, you'll have to look as closely as you can when I hold these up. This was the original ZAF flyer. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with it, back in February of 2014, the Marina Boulevard Station Area Planning Study was released to the community, and Ed Harris held a meeting here on April 30th, and that was the one that exploded because many people were unaware that the city wanted to bust our 30-foot height limit. And just real quickly on the 30-foot height limit, La Jolla, Ocean Beach, the coast, they're all protected by the the California Coastal Act, which limits residential building heights to 30 feet. We weren't, so some of the original residents of Bay Park were very smart, got together and got a 30-foot height limit put in place. Currently in the plan that they want to update, that 30-foot height limit extends over the entire plan area. And to give you an idea of how big an area that is, we've got 805, 52, Marina, and Tecolote Road. This is the plan area of Claremont Mesa. So normally what you would have done, and I saw some drawings, and unfortunately during my research I lost the document, but I believe the original height limit that folks wanted was basically a coastal one, coming right up to where Keels is at and down the hill. Because even the city recognizes this area as what we call public view corridors. In other words, this is our shoreline, this is our ocean, this is our bay. Everybody has a right to view it. So, unfortunately, that 30-foot limit was put over the whole area where it really didn't apply. But at that time, that was fine. Now, as the city updates the plan, what's going to happen is in certain commercial areas, they're going to have to raise that 30-foot limit, which makes sense. Normally in a master plan, what you do, let's say this is your area, and this is your commercial, and this is your residential. So you have master plans to keep those two separate. Even separate multifamily. So the way that height limits historically have been handled is by creating zones. Saying, okay, in here, no 30. Had that happened originally, we would not be having this discussion today. So, the city started out in February of 2014 with the Marina Specific Plan. You've all seen it. Kind of looks like that. One of the documents in the document folder that you will get will be the boundaries. So y'all remember that flyer that we passed out back in 2014? Okay, so it's very limited, and they were talking about just that area, which, by the way, makes sense. It makes sense to conclude, to finish. This is the MSP, the Marina Specific Plan. So this plan is different than the plan update. So it would have made sense to conclude, which they were on target to do, and many of you had attended. How many people attended the ad hoc subcommittee meetings that we've had over the last 3 years? Louis, I know you have. So you know, and I sit on that subcommittee. And by the way, subcommittees are formed because when you're dealing with a large area, large community, you want to, and if you're going to focus on only 1/8 of the community, you create a subcommittee that's an advisory group to advise the community planning group on which way to vote on recommendations. The idea is that these people have more of a stake because they live here, and it'll affect them the most. So, we were surprised in December. Well, we'll go back to the promises. So back in 2014, when the study was released, ZAF's flyer came out, and the important part of that flyer, and you can look at it online. I'm happy to report, this is from the desk of Councilmember Lori Zaff, I'm happy to report that there will be no change in the current 30-foot height limit along Marina Boulevard. I made it very clear to the city's planning director that I oppose any changes to be made. Our voices were heard. In response to my request, the city has formally stated that there will be no effect to change or no effort to change the height limit and density in our community. So what had happened was, if you remember, for those folks that remember, Sarah Boot had a campaign flyer out at the same time. And of course, she was running on this statement here: I adamantly oppose raising the height limit past 30 feet. The height limit is crucial to maintaining the character of our communities, and I will fight to protect the limit on the city council. So essentially, Zaff would not have been reelected in this community had she not reversed. Okay. Then the city, and it's interesting because this map is from the Marina Boulevard Station Area Planning Study, which was the study that was released in 2014, and cut and pasted into it at the last minute. After they had released one draft, they quickly cut and paste and released this one to the community. And it says, the existing height limit overlay zone will be maintained in Claremont Mesa. Proposed zoning to be evaluated in phase 2. That's gobbledygook for, we're going to maintain the 30-foot height limit, but we're going to reserve zoning. So, over the last 3 years, this subcommittee that I sat on, is there any other subcommittee members here tonight that were on that ad hoc? No? They pretty much get all this. We had given our recommendations as far as land use and zoning, and of course, our recommendations were to hold to the 30-foot. The city knew that. They knew that we were going to be adamant about keeping to it. And I'm going to skip over that. So, having not gotten what they wanted, and by the way, one of the documents you'll want to look at online is the Marina Corridor Specific Plan Process Chart, because this will tell you when they were supposed to have everything done. So this plan was supposed to be finalized in December. So they still have not come out with that finalized plan. And they keep pushing it off, and just as they were supposed to finalize it, they came back to the committee in a little hushed voice. Oh, by the way, we're going to take land use and zoning, which is height and density, away from the subcommittee. Well, Mr. City Department, why do you want to do that? I spent about 8 hours going back and forth with Michael Prince and the city attorney, because every time I ask a question, they run and get the city attorney to answer, because they know I'm going to speak to the community. So the only answer that they've come up with is, well, we're going to update the plan. We finally got money for the plan. So they were waiting for funds to update the plan, and as a matter of fact, I had asked them and the deputy planning director to notify me immediately once they got funds to update the plan. So it turns out that they got the funds in July of last year. Didn't tell any of us. And then in December, decided to use that as the excuse to move it. Now, if any of you read the reading materials, did anybody read the reading materials prior to the meeting? A couple of you did? Okay. There's documents in there that lay out what the governor is trying to do. The governor is trying to pass, and has been trying to pass for the last 3.5, 4 years, something called by right. So this is key to remember, by right. And what that means is that the state, that all up and down the state, all of the coastal communities have been gathering together like ours, wanting to maintain not just our height limits, because this isn't just about views, it's not just about height limits, it's about density as well. And it's about an infrastructure that can't handle the amount of housing that the state wants to force upon us. So, because the state wasn't getting the answers that they wanted, the by rights would take all local jurisdiction away. It would remove the voice of the community planning group on anything that is TOD. TOD is transit-oriented development, in particular, transit hubs. And what we're really talking about is a half-mile radius around every transit hub. So you have Claremont Drive trolley, Tecolote. Oh, y'all still have the one in place, Marina Vista, and you got Balboa. So if the governor was successful in getting by right passed, that half-a-mile radius would do that. That would mean that all of the work this community has done to protect its 30-foot height limit, all the work that the volunteers and time that people have put in on community planning groups to protect the height and density is out the door. The legislators have not supported it, but we're seeing some bills starting to pop back up. So in that document and again, I'll encourage you to go back and look at these documents on my website so that you can read them. When you read them, the force of them, the impact of them is what you need to feel, because they're literally saying, after years of working with community planning groups and master plans to design communities, they want to take those rights away. So, one of the things that I'm doing is watching what bills come up. And there may be times, and what I have to do now, because I've gone back to my job as a full-time agent, I'm going to step back. RTB committee is still in place. I'm not leaving you. I'm going to be writing to you. So, I have a series called Talking Real Estate. Many of you have seen that. In fact, most of you have seen it, or you wouldn't be here tonight. That's how I'm going to communicate what's going on with that. I've asked Lori to get involved, Lori Zaff. Because we are under, in San Diego, we're under what's called the strong mayor system. And what that means is this. The mayor is in control of the head of the planning department. Lori, our representative, sits in between. So when land use and zoning was removed from the ad hoc committee, I protested and Dave Potter, another sitting member, seconded the motion, and we had a letter of protest, and that would have been nice to go over had our wireless was working, but you need to read that letter of protest. We were protesting that it literally was stolen from us, taken from us, and that we wanted it returned back to the subcommittee. So Lori's job is to listen to her constituents and her community and take it up with the mayor. Under the strong mayor system, the mayor can just pick up the phone and call the planning director and say, put it back. Take the land use and zoning and give it back to that community planning group where it belongs. That hasn't happened. And in fact, we don't have in writing, and I've asked the chair of our subcommittee, and by the way, had I been able to be the chair of that ad hoc subcommittee, I would have been. I couldn't because the way community planning groups work, only a sitting member on the existing planning group can be the chair of a subcommittee. And the majority of members on these subcommittees have to be sitting members of the community planning group. And then you can have a minority of outsiders. So I think I saw one of the minorities, Carol Schleisman back there is one of the outsiders that got onto the committee. Anyhow, our chair, I'm going to be making a motion, by the way, at our next ad hoc subcommittee, that if she has not obtained in writing a response from both the mayor and Lori Zaff regarding our land use and zoning being put back in to our hands, that we dethrone her, that we vote for another chair. And one of the things that you as community members are going to have to start doing, particularly with the plan update, you're going to have to go to the community planning group meetings, and you're going to have to try to ascertain where people are. Where are they going to fall on these issues? One of the first votes that were taken on the 30-foot height limit and maintaining it was taken, by the way, by the Claremont Community Planning Group prior to this subcommittee being formed. So back in April of 2014, before the subcommittee was formed, there was a vote taken. Susan Morgan had made the motion to vote to keep the 30-foot height limit. And there were several sitting members who are now sitting members of the group still who voted to break it. It's important for you to know who those folks are. I'm not going to call them out on this meeting. What I'm going to do is provide you the information. I'm going to give you the agenda of that meeting, and you can see who voted for what. We have a small window. If we put the pressure that we need to, if we get the help that we need from Zaff to go to the mayor, to put land use and zoning back into the marina-specific plan, then it can be included in the finalization that's going on right now. What the city right now is doing is creating what's called the draft plan. Once that draft plan comes out of their hands, it goes for environmental review. And in between that time, when they release that draft plan, that's going to come out to the community for a 45-day review of it. So it doesn't give us much time. So what I'm personally fighting for is to get that land use and zoning concluded right here. The city's argument is, oh, well, we're going to take all your suggestions. We noted them all down. We wrote them all down. And what we're going to do is we're going to move them over into the plan update. So don't worry. So this is the spin that's coming out of Lori Zapp's office. How many people emailed Lori on it and got back? Okay. So I already know the gist of those responses. Don't worry. It's protected. What she's not telling you is that, first of all, she turns out in 2018, so she may not be around. She's certainly not going to be around by the time this very large document gets updated, the Claremont Community Plan. What it essentially means is by taking land use and zoning, taking density and height, and pushing it to this plan update, is it leaves it in limbo. Leaves it in limbo for at least 3 years, because that's the approximation the city's giving us for the time that it'll take to update the plan. Now, Ocean Beach can tell you they got those kind of quotes time-wise up front, and it took them 12 years to complete their community plan update. So that's what she means by, oh, we're protecting it. We're going to take your suggestions and move them over. It's quite baffling to me, because it would be actually easier for the city if they really were going to hold to their promises on the 30-foot, to leave it in the marina specific plan that was scheduled to be finalized in 2017. When the city starts this stuff, they have to have a timeline that they're going to meet. So, I'm trying to figure out, so why is the city planning department saying, well, we've got money for the update, so we want to push it into there? So I started to dig into the money. And I got to tell you, I used to be a mortgage broker for 30 years, and I did a lot of underwriting of loans, and it's very interesting when you start looking at documentation and you compare it with story. So I just made a public records request and got it back. Here's the invoices from a third-party group called Public Works. Public Works was supposed to be the third party that was going to hold all of the public participation meetings and draft the plan. Their scope of work is rather large, but one of it is community outreach. So as I'm looking through these documents, I'm seeing this large number over and over again, this very, very large number under community stakeholder interviews. And you can see I had quite a few invoices. The total of those invoices was $31,000. The description of that task: community stakeholder interviews. Placeworks will conduct a series of interviews with key community stakeholders. By the way, that's what you are. You're stakeholders. So folks that live and are affected by the plan change are stakeholders, whether you're individuals, businesses, whatever. So Placeworks will conduct a series of interviews with key community stakeholders to obtain input and to build a coalition of support for the proposed concept. The list of community stakeholders, including contact information, will be submitted to the city's project manager for review and approval prior to the interview process. So they were supposed to submit the list. This third party is supposed to submit the list of who the stakeholders that they're going to interview, and they're going to be paid to interview, to the project manager. I asked for that list from Michael Prince this afternoon, and he says, oh gosh, I don't know where I put that. It's gonna take me a few days. I'll get it to you next week. He knew damn well I was having this meeting tonight. All right. PlaceWorks will facilitate up to 2 full working days. Up to 2 full working days. Jesus, I can't imagine. Of up to 10 interviews with stakeholders. Interviews will be clustered where possible to minimize costs. Let me tell you something. You gotta look at these invoices. 7,000 here, 3,000 there, 1,500 there. By the way, I put in another public records request this morning after seeing that nonsense, asking for the names of everyone they interviewed. And on top of that, the responses of the interviewees. Who did you interview for $35,000? And what did they say?
Did you get an address of them also? I've dealt with them.
Yeah, well, I hear you. We're not going that far, but okay. So let me. And this is in the scope of work. This is the scope of work document. This is the contract between the city and PlaceWorks about what they're supposed to do, right? So they'll facilitate up to 10 interviews with stakeholders. Interviews will be clustered where possible to minimize costs. Interviews may occur in person or over the telephone. The exact format, number, and timing of interviews will be subject to review. The exact format, number, and timing of the interviews will be subject to review and approval by city staff. That means they had to keep records. I love it. PlaceWorks will develop and design survey questions, coordinate meeting times and logistics, and select a meeting location. By the way, for the people who did attend the ad hoc subcommittee meetings, how many times would you say you saw people from PlaceWorks at those meetings? How many meetings? You say 0.
4.
I remember 3. So it was 3 to 4 times they showed up. And I didn't see them run around interviewing. The scope assumes that the city staff will attend monthly community planning group meetings, Claremont Mesa and Linda Vista, to present project information, progress updates, and/or draft concepts and recommendations. Okay. The second set of documents I wanted to take you through was the land use and zoning. But before I get there, this was a pass out from the very first ad hoc subcommittee meeting. And in it, I found something that I had to just put in bold. One of the purposes of the specific plan was to establish urban design guidelines and zoning that respond to community needs and values. And then, in small print, maintain the Claremont Mesa 30-foot limit height overlay zone. So they're going to promise. I promise them. Yep, they sure do. And then they had, and it was meeting 4 where we went over the preliminary land use concept and zoning. So we did cover it. And we did give our recommendations, they just didn't like them. I'm looking for the sabotage document. Oh, here it is. So I have never seen anything like this in community planning groups or documents since the inception of them. This was something they passed out called degrees of consensus. And one of the things is how we would respond to choices made by the committee. In this choice, it is, I dislike this recommendation. I do not like the recommendation, but I am willing to defer to the wisdom of the group and promise not to sabotage it. Now, I know they put that in there for my enjoyment. Because prior to the very first meeting, I requested a meeting with Michael Prince, his boss, and the chair of the ad hoc subcommittee that we could not pick, Margie Snit. And my suggestion was we needed to develop a public participation program. That more voices to the table was the only fair way to handle this. So what would we do to encourage more people to come to these subcommittee meetings, these boring planning group meetings? I mean, they're boring as hell. I sit on it, and I'm bored to death. How are we gonna get people to come out? And it was, we got another meeting to attend to, boom. So they rejected any real public participation program, yet they spent 50 grand here on it's entitled community outreach. They did a couple pop-ups. Pop-ups are, you know what Claremont Family Days is, right? You have the little gazebos out there and you present. So they did that. And I was interested to see, well, gee, how much did that pop-up cost? And there was one in there for $6,450. Now, was that for the gazebo? Was that for the printing? Oh, no, it wasn't for the printing. Because you go through the invoices, you find out there's different charges for the printing. So what I'm seeing is a wasteful amount of money by the city. I'm going to keep digging, and I'm going to keep asking questions. How was the money spent? Who got the money? And what did we get for it? These are our tax dollars, folks, by the way. This is your money. And after spending, I also asked, to date, what has been the total cost of the city's involvement with this community for just completing this plan, which they should do? $440,000. So you'll be able to review that document as well on my site. It makes me sick to my stomach to think they've spent $500,000. And now, the reason to push it into the plan update is because they have more money to spend. So, before I leave that, oh, they did. I do have to kind of backtrack here. Public Works did print out some nice stuff. Yeah, and let's see what they said. Oh, objectives. Public Works objectives. Oh, okay, here's a good one. For this project, success relies on involving community members and stakeholders consistently throughout the planning process, including issue opportunity identification, goal setting, and alternatives assessment. Specific objectives for public outreach are to, number one, conduct an open and transparent process incorporating multiple channels for participation. I can only think of two: the ad hoc subcommittee group and a very lousy website they paid $6 grand for. How many people went to the website, the Marina Specific Plan website, when it was up? A couple of you did. Did that look like $6 grand to you? And what they had done was incorporated, I think, some issues with Hillcrest on the same site. So, you know, it was confusing. You get to it and, all right. The second objective is to build trust in the process and develop relationships within the community. So do you guys feel like they've accomplished that? Did they build trust? Yeah, they didn't even start. Solicit input, ideas, and feedback to inform the development concepts. Share project informations and studies with the public and stakeholders. Report to the community planning group on decisions made at key stages of the planning process. Not one report. And I asked Margie Smith, where are the formal recommendations of this subcommittee? Where are they in writing?